Hello fellow RC friends. Well, today's video is going to be a little different than your normal. If you look at the time of the video, it's almost 1 hour. So what it is, it's not necessarily a all-out tutorial where I add in picture-in-picture and text and all kinds of bunch of stuff. But a friend of mine, Tom, saw me fly my DJI Mavic Pro indoors at a fly-in and was just amazed on how stable it was. So he ended up getting the Mavic Platinum quadcopter, and so this is basically, we're out on our AMA flying field and we went through all the settings on your DJI Go 4 app. So if you have a DJI product that you use the DJI Go 4 app and you just kind of want to follow along with me, and as I'm talking about all this stuff, might be just a good refresher, or might be some of the things you didn't know about. I apologize for the video quality. There was some glare on the monitor. I just had a GoPro chest camera, so it's not the best quality, but I tried to enunciate and to talk about each setting as I went through. There is also chapter markers, so if you want to skip to a certain section on camera settings or setting the gimbal for your quad, so check those out if you want to, and enjoy this great hobby. Happy flying! Hey, Captain Mavic here. I am at my AMA flying field, the Indy RC South. I'm here with my buddy Tom. He's right there. Back to us, hey. Alrighty, so we are recording. Tom has his, what is this, a 10-inch tablet?
10-inch. Samsung Tab S4. Nice.
So we are plugged in USB into his tablet. You can also plug it into your phone and fit it in the cradle there. It comes with its own cable that has either micro USB or Apple iPhone cable. So we're in there, so we're going to go ahead and go into the app where we're actually seeing the controls. Alright, so the first thing that pops up is the aircraft status. So it's always good to just kind of briefly look through there. Flight mode is position, compass is normal. If you have any error high readings on your compass or IMU, it'll get you like an orange triangle. So I always want to pay attention to that before you take off. Vision sensors are normal. You're in mode 2 for America. Everything looks good there. This your button confirmation. C1 is camera. Oh, I like your font. You changed that. Camera forward, down, and C2 is camera turn on, turn off, head LEDs. Gotcha. So and that's all customizable. Aircraft battery is 97%. Temperature, gimbal status, and you can format your card right now, but we've got plenty of space. Alright, so X out of that. We do not want to fly in fixed wing mode because we are a quadcopter, so we're going to ignore that. Alright, so at the top, if you have all your GPS satellites, it'll say ready to fly there. If you're indoors or if you don't have a good lock on everything there, it'll be kind of an amber color there. It says attitude mode or opti mode, where you're actually using the vision positioning systems on the quad to fly and be stable. And right now we see like a radar saying that there's an object 4 feet away, and it's kind of pinpointing there at the shed, so that, you know, if we're flying close to something, it kind of changes your distance and tells you what your warning is. So this is kind of like a heads up. This tells you your camera settings, your ISO, which is like the sensitivity of your camera, is 100, which is like the lowest. The shutter is 320. That's pretty fast for shooting video, and so what we can do is, right now we're on the camera, but you can also tap that and go to photos, and you notice how the aspect ratio changed to being photo. And then if we tap that camera icon again, now it's the HD photo. We can go to the settings down here, and then it brings up this heads up display. So the first one is whether or not we want to do auto exposure, or M for my settings, or no, really kidding, it's just manual settings. So here's where the ISO, you can see the difference. Right now it's on 800, so that'd be more like the dusk settings, and you can go way up to 3200. That's really, really sensitive, and you can see it just blows out your exposure. So we're just going to take it all the way down to 100, which is the lowest you can go, but also the best quality. Now, shooting video, we need to check to see first what our video size Right now we're shooting at 2720 by 1530 at 24 frames per second. If you want to shoot 4K, I generally shoot the 3840 by 2160. The next one here is like an ultra UHD, but the aspect ratio is just slightly different. This setting here, 3840 by 2160, is basically twice the size of HD, which is 1920 by 1080. Frames per second is 24, but I like shooting at 30. Makes it a little bit more smooth when you're panning things around. So just out of curiosity to see which ones. If we do want to shoot at 60 frames per second to get a really butter smooth stuff, we have to knock our resolution down to 1920 by 1080. So then we could select 60 frames per second like that. So that's the video size. Now I can go back to my shutter settings. I'm still in manual. So what you want to do is, my video setting was set at 60 frames per second, and there's a video rule called the 180 rule where your shutter speed should be twice whatever your frames per second is. So my frames per second was 60 in the previous setting, so I should do 60 should be 1/20th of a second would be the most ideal to match your settings right here. So now I'm at 1/20th of a second shutter speed, but you see how it's overexposed on your settings. So what I've done is I've bought from Polar Pro, and there's other brands out there. You can buy a neutral density filter, and I have an ND16 on the front of my camera, and they're made to fit right over the cameras on the DJIs. And what that will do is, without changing any color, it actually knocks the light down coming into the sensor of the camera. So then you would be able to shoot it at 1/20th of a shutter speed, ISO 100, and get a proper or much better exposure where it looks correct. Since we don't have the neutral density exposure, I'm going to have to shoot it on auto, and you see that it automatically, in order to make the best exposure, shutter speed is 400th of a second, which is really jittery. So if you're panning your quad around and you look at your video on your computer, the image is going to be stuttering as it pans around. If you see the setting here, but let's say you want to expose more for the inside of the shelter here as opposed to the outside of the sky, you can increase the exposure by these buttons here. So now you see how the inside of the shelter, by going plus 1.7 exposure, makes it lighter. So right now, actually, you can see if I get rid of that window, that the outside looks pretty good. It's a little dark inside the shelter, but you know, that's just kind of exposure of what you may want to do. So that is all the settings under the shutter. Let's go back to the camera. So let's see, white balance, it's on auto, and what I would recommend doing is keeping it fixed. So let's go to sunny, and the reason why that is if you're editing a video, and let's say if you're shooting and you're in the air for like 15-20 minutes, and all of a sudden the sun goes from sunny and then all of a sudden cloud cover comes across, if you're in auto white balance, the camera will automatically change the colors of everything, so your grass will shift in greens, so where if you're locked into sunny, then it'll be much easier to edit and it'll look more natural to our eyes on the video. So I usually leave it on sunny. If you want to, you can go into custom and actually do a custom white balance by tweaking the slider there, but I liked it on sunny. Oops, sunny, back to there. Style. So here is where some people, if you're not going to do any editing at all, and you just want to take the camera card and put it in your computer and then, you know, put it out on the internet, standard or landscape will be just fine. Get rid of the window there. You may not be able to tell, but in landscape it makes the greens a little bit more green, and then the blues a little bit more blue. So let's go back to style. Personally myself, because I know I'm going to be editing later on, and I actually add a custom LUT, which is a lookup table where you can change the values of the blacks and lift the shadows, etc. I do a custom and change the values. Let's see, I believe this one is sharpness, this one I believe is contrast, and I'm not really sure what, but I have mine. I have to look mine up, but I usually have mine all at -3 or -2 on one of these. I forget the setting, but for Tom we'll just leave it on standard. And then color, here's where you can you know, add some extra saturation by making it vivid, true color. De-cine-alike is if you're going to be editing later on. Let me actually just point this a little better so you can see some of the different settings. All right, so there's vivid. The grass is a lot more green. True color, so this is more like what our eye actually sees. You can see vivid is just way extreme. De-cine-alike, it's kind of more on the neutral side, and D-log is like the most bland of all of them. What it actually does is it kind of records as much information into your video, and then later on you can apply, like I said, a lookup table to actually correct it and make the contrast and the colors exactly the way you want to. Film, that's really kind of muddies up the blacks, black and white. You can do that. Cool, twilight. There's all kinds of stuff you can go through. So we will just actually leave it on true color. So that's color settings. Go to the gear. The histogram, I like having the histogram on, and we'll talk about that once it pops up later on. Lock gimbal while shooting. I don't think I've ever used that setting before, and it may not be an option on my Phantom 3 Pro or Mavic Pro. So we'll leave that off for now. Portrait mode. The only time I would actually go to portrait mode is if you're doing a 360 or 180 panorama. And you can see what that did is basically it took the photo, what we're looking at, and made it portrait. So that if you're in air and you want to tell it to do a panorama, it will hover and then take a picture and then turn like 15 degrees, take another picture, and then it can actually stitch them all together and make a 360 panorama. So that's where you would use portrait mode.
No way.
Yeah.
No.
Yep. And so by going portrait, you see I got a lot more of the sky, a lot more of the ground, and it'll give you a more of a panorama once it's done stitching together. So if I take it off portrait mode, now it's more like the standard landscape TVs that we're used to. AFC, I'm not sure what that is. I have to go check on the manual on that. Auto sync HD photos. That would probably be if you're going to be having it do an HD image from like taking 3 or 5 multiple exposures and have it automatically align them. So that's good that it's on by default. Video captions, we don't necessarily want to have those on. Overexposure warning, that's kind of good if you were shooting video and you want to do this. So when I turned it on, you saw these kind of zebra patterns pop up there. So that's telling me that those clouds are overexposed with the current camera settings. So if I turn that off, you can look at the image again. I apologize for the glare on this screen, tablet screen. But the clouds are actually overexposed and there's no detail left in those whites. So just by turning on the overexposure warning, that kind of gives you a visual of when you're setting your camera settings. Said, oh, I'm probably overexposed on that. If you're not worried about the cloud detail, then that's fine. Long exposure auto preview. So when you're taking a near sunset picture and it'll do a long exposure, like an 8-second exposure, you can actually preview it. Headlights auto turn off. It's interesting that it has that. So you can either, Tom has them on what, C2 I think is, yes, which you had it to turn off the headlights.
Off and they go off when you start shooting video.
Yep. And the only time you'd want them off necessarily is when you're maybe dark. you can sometimes, or if you're shooting close to a object, the red lights on the front of the arms you would actually probably see in your video as it lights up the building or whatever you're flying close to. Alright, grids. So right now it's off. If we turn on the grid lines, now I have a checkerboard, like a tic-tac-toe board there. And for photography wise and composition, this talks about rule of thirds. So if you are trying to compose something, and this point here where the intersection, lower left, upper left, and then this is hiding it, but upper right and lower right, those are a powerful point of the composition in your camera settings, in your composition. And so if you have a subject that's in there rather than being dead center is kind of boring. If you place the subject in one of these corners there, then it's going to be much more interesting to the viewer. Alright, so grid and diagonals. So then here it has both the lower thirds section as well as diagonals into that. So right now we'll just go ahead and turn them back off. Center point, right now we've got that turn, let's see, oops. Center point, got all kinds of stuff. Cross, narrow cross, frame and cross, square. So you got a square and a square. We'll just go back to the cross. So you can kind of just pick your color, what if you want to target or something like that. So that's just dealer's choice what you want to do. Anti-flicker. So here, if you are shooting where there's like fluorescent lighting, sometimes metal halide lighting. In America, the AC frequency is 60 hertz. In Europe, it is 50 hertz. So if you're shooting overseas, you want to have your anti-flicker on 50 hertz. If you're here in America, you want it on 60. Auto, it should be able to detect according to your GPS. Peaking threshold. Let's see what this is. Peaking threshold, close, high, standard, and low. That could be, if it shows peaking indicators on the focusing, that could be relating to this peaking threshold. I haven't used it. File index mode. Okay, so here's something important. So file index mode by default is on reset. So what will happen is you do a day's worth of shoot video and photos, and then you take your card out and then you put it back in, and then you start shooting it again. It'll reset. Say if you shot 100 pictures and then you put it back in the card, and it'll start back on DJI 001 and then 2 and so forth. So I always do continuous. That way, as you're dumping these images from your quad to your computer, you know that you're not going to have two images with the same file name. So it just automatically remembers what the last photo number was and makes the next one higher. Reset camera settings and then format card. So that is it on the photo settings. The playback here is if you want to quickly play back while the quadcopter is setting up, but there's nothing there, so we will just hit back. And let's see. Oh, so that will, I have to double check on what this actual icon is. Looks like autofocus. Okay. And then you can actually tap around with your finger and have it focus on the different portions. So generally what happens is when you're taking off on the ground, it wants to focus on the foreground, the grass, but then once it's in the air, it will recompose. If it doesn't, then you can tap the screen and have it focus on something far away, so that way you have infinite focus. So everything else, it's just some options. Auto exposure lock, okay. And then up here you have a quick access to position settings, remote identification in case you want to put in the FAA numbers. You can do that. Basic settings, home point settings. Alright, so the two home point settings are this. If you have it on, set the current position of the aircraft as home. You say okay. So if
the home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
So if you take off from here, and let's say you're walking as you're filming and so forth, and you end up 100 yards downfield, then you tell it to go to home, it's going to go back to where you took off 100 yards away from you. The other option, which I usually use, is set current RC location as the home point. And what that...
The home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
So now, as you're flying, and if you walk 100 yards away, it constantly updates your home point, so when you tell it to come to home, it's going to come to where your RC controller is, which is very helpful. Enable dynamic home point. When dynamic home point is enabled, the aircraft will continually update, so yes, we want that enabled. And that, of course, uses the cellular to keep track of it. If you don't have cellular on your tablet, then you can download or cache the maps ahead of time. Enable intelligent flight modes, yes. So if you are in the P mode, positioning mode, then it has the forward obstacle sensing, GPS, visioning, and all that stuff. You can also do the advanced flight modes. If you switch it to sport mode, and on the controller, it's right here. So right now we're in P positioning mode, but if I swap it to sport mode, then I lose the things like follow me and so forth, and it's more sport mode is more for flying fast and just flying fast, I guess. Okay, so return to home altitude. So here is where, and the default, I don't know why it never gives us this in feet, it's always meters, but he's got it as 61 meters, which is 200, and actually good, mine doesn't actually do the conversion for me, but 200 feet, excuse me. I think I have my return to home altitude. Yeah, actually, no, I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of max altitude flight. Yeah, Tom knows. Yeah, come on, Mark. All right, so what this return to home altitude is, say you are flying and you tell it to go to return to home, it's going to go up to 200 feet first, and then follow the path back to home. So that way you're going to fly over trees and not into trees and get stuck. Flight restrictions, if you are just starting out, I would highly recommend turning on beginner mode, and that'll basically just limit you, turn it back off, on how high you can fly, how far you can fly, and it kind of makes the controls a little more dumbed down, so you kind of get your feet wet doing it. So here's the maximum altitude, 120 meters, which is what I have mine at. It's 393 feet. So by setting that, if you start rising up and you kind of forget and not pay attention to what your altitude is, it'll automatically stop at just below 400 feet, which is by law. Distance limit. This is very cool. By turning this on, he's got it set to 1,000 meters. And so let's go actually reduce this down just for this example. Let's just say 50 meters. And now if I go back to here and I try to bring up the map, so now you can see the red triangle is the actual quadcopter. The home is just because we're probably in a building, that's why it's there. But this green circle that's the 50 meters radius. That actually, can we turn on the hybrid or satellite? Did you cache that?
I think so.
Okay.
Offline maps are standard Mojo.
Gotcha. So now this green circle is, if I were to try to fly, because I set my max distance to 50 meters, it would actually stop at that green radius and just not fly too far away. I used this once when I was flying up in Muncie, Muncie, Indiana, the AMA headquarters. I was doing a search and rescue type thing, and I just set it at, I think it was 1,600 feet or 2,000 feet, because I didn't want it to go fly off. If it happens to get an error or something like that, it actually would stop once it hits that radius, which is kind of cool. So we'll set it back to, you headed at 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Advanced settings. Alright, so here's where we can get into the sensitivity of the radio controller, gain and expo tuning. Alright, so by default, your throttle, you see how it has kind of an S curve on all three of them, and they're all three basically about the same, 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. The throttle I don't really mess with too much, so that's, if you really want to make it smooth, you can actually take your finger and push down in the center, up and down. If you go all the way down, then it's 0.10 as a throttle. So what happens is, if you are throttling up, you can see where, as I move the throttle here, it's moving that dot. So it's going to be smooth on the throttle, but then as I get towards the end, it's going to really ramp up in throttle. So I'm going to put that back to its default 0.25. Now what I do change is the rotate right, or actually rotate left. So this is the yaw, and so when you're yawing or turning the copter horizontally back and forth to do like a pan in the air, as you're moving this stick, the yaw, I generally try to have that being a very smooth, almost all the way down, like 0.15 or so. And what that will happen is, when you're doing video and you're doing a slow yaw around, it'll be much smoother than the default 0.25. The other is the forward, back, and I just leave that as where it is. So that's expo of your radio control. Sensitivity. So by default they're all at 100, and I think it's way too high on those. I actually run mine a lot lower. So altitude, like if you throttle up, it'll kind of go up quickly, and 100 is the max sensitivity, so I maybe leave that at 80. The brake is something interesting. So right now it's at 130. So if you are in like attitude mode or GPS mode, and you fly forward and you're going fairly fast, then you let go of the sticks, the brake is like a brake on a car, where it'll just stop, and and your video will be like, whoa, just stop, and it's very jarring. So you can play with the numbers, and I think I have mine down to 80ish or so, but this is something you kind of want to play with in air. Push it, maybe change it to 80, and then try it, see if you like it. Go ahead and do it 80. Okay, so 80, and then so as you're moving forward and you let go of the sticks, it'll just slow to a stall and then stop, kind of like easing on the brakes. Yaw endpoint, 100 I think is too high, so let's maybe make it like 70, and that's so that when you're getting to the end, it kind of smooths into movement. Gain, basic gain, pitch, roll, and yaw is 100. I usually bring those down too. So in relating to an RC airplane, you have a high rate and a low rate. So this is kind of very similar to that. So the pitch is, 100. That's almost nearly high, so you can mess with this, suit to taste. You can restore to default if you don't like the settings you put in there. Sensors state. So this just kind of gives you at a glance the IMU, which is the internal brain type of thing. For the acro, it's very, very low, which is good. It's green. The gyroscope for the 2 gyros is also very low. It tells you green, excellent, amber, gold is good, and red is poor. I was in one instance where I was flying in St. Louis, and there was a lot of magnetic interference there, and I actually had my gyro and my accelerometer slightly off, and they were not in the excellent settings. So I actually did recalibrate my IMU there on that site. The compass, kind of the same thing. You can just at a quick glance to see green, good to go. We did sensors, cinematic mode, brake, gain. Okay, so cinematic mode this is one of the intelligent flight modes, where the brake gain, it's kind of what we're talking about with like the yaw. If you're in the cinematic mode and you're flying and you let go of the sticks to apply the brake, then 10 is like the lowest value. It just kind of eases to a stop. And yaw sensitivity, we'll leave it as that. Others, RC signal lost, return to home, which is great. So or you can have it do landing or just hover right where it is. There's been one time, not on my Mavic, but I had a Phantom 3 Pro where I've lost the RC connection to the quad for like 10 seconds or more, and it just started to come to home, so it kind of freaked me out. But eventually, as it got close to home, I got the control back. Emergency stop mode. Push sticks in inner or outer corners breakdown. So this I do not you would not want to do in air, because if you push the sticks down in the in or down and out, it looks like, then that'll just shut off your props and it'll fall like a brick through the so be careful when you're doing that. Propeller guards, that you turn that on if you've installed propeller guards. Advanced settings, okay, we're good there. A lot of settings to go through. Next one down is the visual navigation settings. So you can enable, disable at a overall glance. You can turn them all off. Come on. There it goes. So it'll say turn off all of them. I don't want to do that. I just want to keep them on. So we've got an obstacle avoidance enabled. Enable horizontal obstacles avoidance tap to fly. So if you're doing a tap to fly advanced mode, you can have it to avoid, if it comes towards the tree, it'll just go around the tree, which is cool. Enable backwards flying in active track. Yeah, if you're doing active tracks, like you're trying to track a person, then if it gets too close to something, when activated, it'll automatically fly backwards if the subject being tracked is moving towards it. So if say you're following a person, all of a sudden they turn around and then start coming back at the quadcopter, and it happens you have to be flying low, you don't want that to keep trying to quadcopter going forward. So you can actually enable this, and it will sense that now the subject is coming towards the quad, and it'll automatically back up. Enable obstacle avoidance active track. When activated, the aircraft will avoid obstacles horizontally, otherwise it will slow to a stop. So he's got on all these by default. Advanced settings, enable forward downward positioning. So you have some downward sensors, which will help in the takeoff and precision landing, which is good. Landing protection, the aircraft will check the landing area when landing protection is enabled. And what will happen there is, if you're coming to a land, it'll hover like 2 feet off the ground and just wait there. And so what you have to do is, while the aircraft is flying, you have to continue to hold down just the left throttle. You don't do the down and in or down and out, just the left throttle, and that'll tell it, yes, I want you to land. And then it will say okay, and then it doesn't really say okay, but it will continue to land safely on the ground and shut off the motors. So you just keep that left stick straight down, 6 o'clock position, until it shuts off the props. Precision landing. So when it actually takes off, it takes pictures of the landing spot, so that when it tries to come home, it tries to search for that in its library reference. Return to home obstacle detection. So when there's enough light there, it tries to do obstacle detection when it's returning to home, which is good. So that's all the advanced settings in the vision position system. This one is for controller. Remote controller calibration. Well, we're not going to do that. So if I've never actually had to control or calibrate my controller, so. But if you do, it's right there. Enable fixed wing mode, we're not going to do that. Remote LED screen, LCD screen. Okay, so that is actually this guy here, and it'll tell you what all the different things are. And honestly, I know Tom wanted to have his tablet on this stand like this, so that he can actually see the settings on here, which is smart. Personally, myself, since I have my phone right here, I hardly ever look at this thing, but if you do happen to lose connection on your phone, you can actually read the settings here and see how much battery life you have, the coverage, the clearance, and the height, and all that. So this is a very nice feature. Stick mode is your mode 2. And here's where you can assign your buttons, whether you want to do camera down. I think on mine I have C1 as in battery, so I can tip that and on the screen it'll pop up the battery life, but you don't necessarily need to do that because you can see the battery life up here. It's just one of the things that I did. This one actually is kind of helpful here. So this is a 5-way button, so you can, he's got it as zoom in, zoom out, left, zoom in, zoom out. So if you want to, and here's how I've got mine set up. So you can tap here, and I've got mine, so if I push this up, then it actually has the camera quickly go straight out. So let's see if that's an option on his. Camera forward, down. There we go. And then the down button is the same thing. So now let's go back to this, go back to the camera and see if this works. Yep. So now I'm tapping this, and actually down does the same thing. So right now, if say that you are doing some pans and the pan is on this adjustable knob here, all of a sudden you want to quickly see what's above, you can just tap this middle button and then it goes straight up or down. So that's how I have and you can customize it to be many different things. Back to that. So here is if you have multiple aircraft connected, I guess this one would be your primary remote controller. HD, this is relating to the video image transmission back to you. Channel mode is usually good to leave it in auto. If you do custom, then he's got it as the maximum bandwidth allocation, which is good. Image transmission code rate is 4 megs, which is fairly good. Image transmission mode, regular mode, HD mode. See on mine, it's, oh, there it is, okay. If in custom, it would actually bring up a Spektrum here showing you if there's other frequencies that are nearby and where you're competing and so forth. So right now we're in this area here, and it's really good signal because we're out in the middle of nowhere. But if you do need to actually put it on a specific, you can slide it around according to what is in your area. So we'll go back to auto. There it goes. And good for that. And then go to battery. So this shows the cell voltage of all 3 cells. 12.6, temperature, smart return to home. So what that, if that enables, then say if you were flying out 400 yards and you only have 20% battery life, it will automatically, with the smart home enabled, it'll automatically tell you when to return home based on how far away you are from yourself. And if you're really far away, then it'll start telling you sooner, hey dummy, get back to home because you're going to run out of battery. So that's kind of cool. Critical battery warning is by default 15, and low battery warning is at 30, which is fine. Flight time, actually I've never actually, oh, that, I guess that would be as it flies. Show voltage on main screen, yes, that's good. Time to discharge. So here is something cool. These are smart batteries, and by default it's set to 10 days. So if you fly and you put it back, you put your quad away and you don't touch it for 11 days, well, on the 10th day it's going to start automatically discharging your batteries to the safe storage voltage, and you don't have to worry about ever discharging them like we do our LiPo batteries for the RC planes and quads. You know, some people can change them to 4 days, 5 days, whatever. 10 days is fine. These are really smart batteries. Details, let's see, that's just pertaining to the battery. And then the gimbal settings, there's a lot. So there's 2 modes of the gimbal. So follow mode is the default, and that's where when you're flying around and you do yaws and pans and all that, it tries to keep the horizon level. If you're in FPV, that's more like a racing quadcopter where you do a bank, then the horizon in your video image will bank as well. So that's just a personal taste. Camera advanced settings, gimbal pitch settings, gimbal pitch smoothness. So you can play with this to suit the taste. Gimbal pitch speed, lower value is good. So right now he's got it on 10. You can see the image there and how I moving the gimbal and how slowly it moves up, which is great. Some people that don't just haven't been told, if you have a high gimbal speed, this one's not really as extreme as I thought it would be. It would be really fast to go up and down, and it doesn't really look good for video. Gimbal pitch limit. So here, if I take the gimbal all the way up, that's as far as it goes. If I enable this, now I can go up 30 more degrees and I actually get the, you might get the props. Hey there. In the image. So I generally leave that off. I'm going to go ahead and center that back straight out. Gimbal yaw settings, gimbal yaw synchronous follow. So I'll leave that on, and what this means is as you're flying and you are yawing the quad itself, so it's actually turning. You saw how the video gimbal started to turn by itself, so that's going to give you a smoother, as you're turning the quad, it's also turning the gimbal of your video image and gets you a much better signal or image. You can recenter the gimbal. Let's see, adjust gimbal. Now I've actually used this, so let me get this quad straight out. We're on a table here and I'm not 100% positive if this table is level, but you can see here, hopefully you can see in this image, where the horizon doesn't look equal or level in the actual camera. You can actually compensate for that here in the gimbal adjust, and I actually have mine set on 0.6. So in air, Tom's got his compass or his level out. What do you think?
Pretty damn low.
It's pretty level? Okay. So what we can do is, as we're flying, if we're just hovering in air and we know a part of the land is flat, there's not a slope to it, then we can kind of use the crosshairs, and in air you can adjust the gimbal accordingly. And then once you set it there, I just leave it. So we'll just put it back to default. Okay, go back to settings, gimbal, auto calibrate gimbal. That's if you somehow it's gotten messed up or whatever, you can have it, you have to set it on a level surface and it'll go through and calibrate. And then lastly, the 3 dots, units, you can set it to be imperial or metric. Camera, so camera long press action is the gimbal control, which is good. Live streaming if you want to. Map, show flight routes. Yes, I like to have that on by default, so that when you're back in the DJI app, it'll show like a white chalk of where you've been. You can clear your flight route.
What's the difference between those two?
Well, clear flight route and show flight. Oh, and map, show flight route. Map, show flight routes. Interesting. It seems to be the same, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh, I'd have to check on this one, because I don't know if mine, unless they had a recent update with the DJI app, why they would have 2 like that. One of them could be maybe as you're flying it can clear it, and the other one is clearing it actually from the memory.
Maybe from the video.
Could be. Oh,
In editor.
that could be interesting. Video cache. So as I'm flying, the image transmission is coming back to the controller and then to my phone, so I can use my phone as my monitor. It is actually recording a low resolution. If I take photos, it records a low resolution photo. Shooting video, a very low resolution video, and it's stored actually on your device. So if you want to, if your device gets full, you can actually clear the cache locally once you start up recording. And then record audio with video cache. So that's where you can actually hear audio. Since the DJI does not have a camera microphone in air, it records the audio somehow through your tablet onto your video as you're getting recording. Cache to SD card, that's on. largest video cache capacity. So this is 10 gig. If you have a large amount of free space on your tablet or phone, then you can set it up to be fairly large. I think I've got mine set to be 2 gig. And then that just doesn't jam up your device with all the low resolution information. Okay, adaptively reduce cache resolution. So if you turn that on, then if your device gets full, then it's going to reduce the resolution of the video recording. That's just the cache to the low resolution thumbnails to your device, not the recording onto the actual SD card. Alright, auto video cache cleanup. The oldest cache will be automatically cleared when the cache has reached 2 gig. Yeah, that's good. So I'll turn that on. So now once we reach the 2 gig limit that we set, as it'll automatically, to make more space, it'll delete the oldest files, which may be from 2 months ago, which is fine. And that, again, that's just the low resolution to your device, not your SD card. And then here's if you have a license, part 107, you can punch in that information there. Warnings, and I think that is it. So now we are down. Oh, this tells us we have HD video transmission. It looks great. The controller has good, strong signal. The dot with the waves out, that's the obstacle avoidance. We have 19 satellites. We're in GPS position mode. And we have gone through all the settings. If you want to see the map versus that, all you do is tap on that, and let's see if it does it on his.
It does.
Yep, so if you swipe upwards, it clears off all the images there, and you have a clean resolution. Then you swipe up again, or swipe down, and it brings them all back. This radar I really like, so as you're flying away, you may not be able to tell the orientation of the quad, and this will always show you the red triangle is the quad in relation to you and how it's facing. So if it's facing, coming towards you, and you're moving your sticks thinking that you're going away, this will be a visual indicator. So then obviously the height, 0 because we haven't taken off, and it's saying it's 73 feet away from my home position, but it's erroneous because I'm right here. Horizontal speed as you're flying, vertical speed, and vision positioning system. So that is, if you are hovering over ground, it'll tell you, you're 0.3, 0.7 feet above the ground. But it does get fooled on some objects, obviously like water. So be very careful when you're doing that. Okay, Tom, I think. Oh no, we haven't gone over everything. So now we're still in the normal positioning mode, not the sport mode. So now it allows us to go into the advanced flight modes. So if you didn't see how I got into that, it's on this left hand side, it's the controller. So now we're by default normal. Quick shot I've never used, cannot use this function without taking off. Okay, so that's right. You can't activate any of these advanced modes until you actually have taken off and you're in the air like 10 feet or more. So we'll talk about them and maybe then try them later on. Quick shot is for video. You just want to quickly get your stuff. Gesture is if you actually want to stand there and look funny doing your arms and tell it to take off or land or whatever, you can do that. Active track, it's got a person running, so you can, while you're hovering, you would see, and you actually would draw like a square around the person and then just tell it to go, and it will actively track the person as they're going there. Tap to fly always scares me, but the theory behind that is, say if you're shooting and you're not as good operating the remote control, you could actually just say, I want to tap right there on that horizon, I want to tap and go there, so it'll fly to that spot, or you want to tap and go over there. I'd rather just be in the control myself. Tripod mode, now this is useful, I use this often. So what happens is when you're taking off and you're actually recording video, I would actually be in tripod mode, and then it basically just slows the controls down so that even if you do a full pitch roll or whatever, or yaw, it makes it nice and butterly smooth, and like you're Actually, we're shooting with a tripod being attached to it, but it's good for indoor flight. It's good for outdoor flight if you're maybe doing a wedding or something and you want to do a slow movements around. Okay, so there's 3 dots. There's more. Cinematic mode, that's kind of cool too. We talked about one of the settings in that, and that's for, again, making more. You have to read the manual to see what the specific details are in cinematic mode. Terrain follow is a nice feature. So if you are flying and you're tracking at a subject, if the subject is going up a hill, you don't want the quad just to remain the same altitude and just run right into the hill. So it will sense that, oh, the ground is coming up closer to me, so it actually will rise up and follow the terrain. The point of interest I use often too. So what happens there is, say we want to orbit around a lighthouse or a light pole or something like that. So you would enable the point of interest. You go to that interest, you go above it, you point your gimbal your camera straight down, and you would mark this as my point of interest, and then you fly back, and you can set your radius, say 100 feet or whatever, adjust your gimbal position so you get your frame, and then you say go, and what it will do is do a slow orbit around that point of interest. And while it's doing that, you can actually increase the speed of it, and you can actually override the gimbal if you want to, and override the altitude. So if you want to do a little more cinematic stuff and have it automatically know this is the radius I need to go around this object, but then you can adjust the gimbal and increase the pitch manually and override, which is very cool. Follow me is if you want to do like a one shooter, you're on vacation and you want to kind of have someone be in the air shooting you as you're going down the trail. You can do the follow me mode. Waypoints, that's where you actually have to fly to the spots, mark a waypoint, and it's usually like C1 or C2, depends on how you set it up, and say this is my point 1. You fly to a new spot, this is point 2, and then so forth. And as you're doing the waypoints, it actually remembers your yaw, what direction you've set it at, and your camera gimbal position. So I did a shoot where I had it like 10 waypoints, and I had basically started at waypoint 1. It was at, say, 100 feet. It was at 320 degrees on the compass, and then the gimbal straight out. And then I had second waypoint being over the object, and so you physically go through and you mark your waypoints, and then once you're done, you come back and you say, do that mission, and just let it record, and it'll go through in each position and do it. It's really cool. Home lock. So what home lock is, let's see, home lock and course lock. So home lock is where if you enable that and you are, say, you're flying out and you kind of lose your direction, your quad may be turned. Let's say if it's turned 90 degrees. Normally you would fly, if it's straight out and facing away from you, push the pitch forward, it goes forward, push back, the stick back, it comes back. Let's say you've yawed and the quad is now turned 90 degrees. Well, if you push forward, normally it would go the direction forward in the quadcopter, which would be moving to the right. Well, what happens is with home lock, if you push forward, no matter which way the quad is oriented, it'll automatically go away, or pull back, it'll automatically come back, again, depending on which way the quad is facing, which is kind of good if you're beginning and you're not really sure which way it's facing. You can use the home lock. Look how steady that is. Rock solid.